Hi guys, my name is Catherine Pabon. I am the host of Z-Files podcast, where we bring your curiosity to our conversation. Today we have a segment, Behind the Ballot. I got a special guest, Jacob Pride. Would you like to introduce yourself a little bit, your campaign, what you're campaigning for?
Absolutely. So as you said, I'm Jacob Pride. I'm running for re-election as Smithfield Township Supervisor. I'm born and raised in our area, and I became one of our youngest elected officials in the area. And I've carried the inspiration, that comes with that throughout my 5 years so far as supervisor. I'm hoping to earn another term to keep the momentum that we have in Smithfield Township. There's not a lot of young people in politics, so it's refreshing to have someone like you hosting this and inviting other folks on.
So what was the start of you running for the first time? What inspired you?
What inspired me to get into public service was the fact that so many people my age were leaving the area after high school. It was pretty much a foregone conclusion. I went to ESU, so I'm a proud warrior.
Oh, great.
But a lot of our friends, moved out of state or went elsewhere in Pennsylvania.
That's a pattern.
Absolutely. And I felt like our local governments didn't really represent young people. So I thought it would be really important to get our perspective on the Board of Supervisors in Smithfield in particular, because that's where I live. And I was able to bring down the average age quite a bit. It's not necessarily all about age. I often say it's not age, it's outlook. But it's important to have people feel like their voice is being heard by someone in our demographic. It's really, really not frequent to have elected officials under 60 for the most part.
It's not. And so you would say a priority of yours definitely was to keep people here. Like, we are a college town, so it's amazing that there's a strong pattern of being a college town, but people needing to leave right after college, like when they go to ESU here.
Absolutely. One of the biggest things that challenges us is economic development in our area. Oftentimes you'll have people coming back when they're later on in life because there's not a lot of opportunity to stay or have a starter career or a starter home even. So those were priorities that I've set at the township, and I've worked with my colleagues, both Democrats and Republicans, to make sure that we're addressing those needs. Economic development is essentially the lifeblood of our area. We're very, very service-oriented, but we do have large sects of manufacturing, and we have other professions in the township as well. It's important to highlight that and find a way to make sure that they're, either hiring younger people, something that allures them to stay here. We're a fantastic area to be, and it's really disappointing that when you look at housing prices or starting pay at certain places, you're going to be in a real bind.
It's not really much desire to stay, like with those cases. So your vision, like going forward, if re-elected, what are your top priorities for the next term? How will you ensure that Smithfield's growth is fiscally and environmentally sustainable moving forward?
Well, in terms of the environment, we've done a number of things during my first term already. We restarted the Environmental Advisory Council, which weighs in on land development, ordinances, future development, and even delves into planning a little bit. We've also appointed folks to the Planning Commission that share that sustainability interest that we have. And we also created the Office of the Conservation and Recreation Director, which we filled with Dr. Alex Jackson. And he's been an amazing addition to the township, which has helped us balance sustainability and economic growth. It's really, really important that that you can strike a balance between the two. You can't just say it's only economic development. You can't just say that it's only
you don't have to choose one. Like, you have both.
We have a number of employers in our area that really maximize both. So I would like to keep that model going forward. I also want to clean up more blight in the township. It's been an issue all over the Poconos where people abandon properties and they leave them in rough shape, and it really hurts home values and certainly investors that might want to come into our area and help improve the area. If you're surrounded by blight, you're less likely to be interested in either staying or even coming here. So I'd like to clean up some of that blight. I'd like to continue our economic development. We have a number of possibilities for mixed-use development, which will help facilitate the preservation of our rural areas, which will keep them from being urban sprawl, like you see down in Houston and some other areas where it's just divided by highways and roadways and unnecessary pavement. So we'd really like to expand upon the multi-use methodology It's important to know that you can add housing and jobs at the same time, all while limiting the potential exposure to growth for the school district. It all depends on careful planning, and that's what we strive to do in Smithfield.
It's amazing. Oftentimes people feel like there's a line. You can only have one or the other. You can have urban or you have to have rural. It's like you can't have both. So what are like some projects that you specifically have done during your term of really combining those, like that you could really just put your name on?
Well, one of the most important things in any type of development, be it residential or commercial, is the use of utilities. So I participated in the grant that helped the BCRA expand their water line down Airstrip Road, which led the way to the Vigon International expansion. Right now they're halfway done, so it's a completely closed off building, but they'll be adding a second phase which roughly doubles the size of it. That creates good jobs in the area. They've been a fantastic community partner. They're now owned by Zealous, but they've still maintained those local roots. So that's just one example of economic development in my tenure. We also have Smithfield Gateway, which is now really got the momentum. The Wawa is finally open. That took
been in there
long enough. A lot of folks go to that Wawa quite frequently.
It's a great location, like just right off the highway. And I've seen a lot of like truckers and like, you know, how we have like the warehouses and everything. Like, so it's being in good use.
Absolutely, and it's right next to the St. Luke's, which has the Care Now and a number of other preventative care facilities inside of it. It's important to kind of throw them both as puzzle pieces there, and that will lead the way to residential on either side of the development, because there's property on both sides of 209, which Senator Brown facilitated $3 million to finally complete the improvements there, which will make it even safer. It's important to note that the traffic lights will be signalized via Green Light Go. That's going up online any day now. That makes sure that the traffic data is automated, taken in real time. It syncs that whole corridor on 209 to make sure there's no unnecessary waiting.
And then Jacob, so you lived in Smithfield your whole life. When you think about the Smithfield like you grew up in versus the one that you're helping shape now, what are some real changes have you seen like from when you were a kid?
I think it's obvious that you see folks moving in from other areas.
Yeah.
And a lot of folks see that as a detraction, but I see it as a good thing.
We're like an diversity.
area. Yeah, we're a diverse area. We're a desirable area to be. Smithfield is known for having good jobs, safe housing, a great community to be in and interact with. I think it's a good thing that more people want to be part of that, but we have to make sure that we're facilitating that growth in a responsible way, so it's not creating sprawl or altering the character of the neighborhood. I think it's often misplaced to say that Monroe County is a rural community. I really think that depending on where you're at, it could be urban, could be suburban, or it could be rural. There's varying differences because we have 20 municipalities that each have their own planning. Smithfield is different than Middle Smithfield, although we're similar and we're friends.
Just down the street.
Absolutely. The same thing with Stroud Township. So we don't have a main street or a main street corridor in Smithfield Township. I think over time we might have something akin to that in a more suburban setting, like you see in Bucks County and Chester County in the southeastern part of the state. I think it's important to note that we're working hard to balance preservation with growth. I don't think that it's something that you have to choose one or the other.
So, on this campaign, you obviously have an opponent, and you're running on the Democratic ticket. Some cite who might be opposing that there's a huge increase of like tax hikes during your tenure, and suggest like some personal appointments. Can you justify those increases and point to specific improvements that and decisions of why you made them? Give you a chance to like clear that air.
Sure. I mean, I think to begin, there's a number of things that are being said that are half-truths. You know, that's not something that we're not used to. It's especially true in national politics. It's a shame that that's coming down to the local level because there's no red or blue way to fill a job at the township or to fix the roads. One of the most important things is knowing that we're going through a fair process to make sure that anything's being done correctly, whether that's development, personnel management, contract management, etc. So we've had some tax increases. It's true. I can't shy away from that, and I wouldn't. It's important to know that the township went roughly 2 decades without a tax increase. Can you imagine 20 years of inflation, what that does?
Yeah.
And if you include the fact that some of my predecessors didn't budget appropriately for the replacement of capital improvements like trucks, roads, other massive purchases, or financing, you're really going to struggle to make up for that. And I don't cast blame on them. There's certainly a time and a place to reckon with, how we got in this position, but what's important is how we're recovering from it.
Right.
The average increase was something about $400 if you start from when I took office to now. Okay. It's important to know that we didn't raise taxes this year, but we're continuing our support for our first responders. We had to have a tax to do that. At this point, volunteerism is getting so low that it's not sustainable. So what we're doing now is helping them transition into what will eventually be some sort of paid model. I think it's a question of when, not if.
Yeah.
The ambulance service is already in a similar position. But
so
at the end
is
of the
something
day,
that's rolling?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if we want to have safety in our community, we need to support those groups. And not enough people were doing that voluntarily, so we had to turn to a tax. In terms of the other improvements, though, the return on our investment has been incredible. We have taken in roughly $4.8 million in grants during my tenure alone, and the match on that is so low that it pays for itself several times over.
Okay.
In terms of the staffing, they can make allegations about nepotism, favoritism, choosing people that are only Democrats. That's certainly not true.
Right.
It's a shame that we're resorting to things like that. It's a shame that we're talking falsely about conflicts of interest. And, in this day and age, it's important to take the appropriate measures to make sure that you're safe from those things. And when I had a conflict because I was working for a legislator and we were dealing with state grants, it made sense to recuse myself. But that didn't prevent township business from getting done. And even if there was a tied vote, there's something known as the rule of necessity, which would have allowed me to vote anyway.
Okay.
So it's unfortunate that we're doing that, and I don't like making my staff's lives political footballs. I don't think that's fair to the good people that want to serve our community.
Right.
And we've done a phenomenal job with them. It's absolutely tough. You're elected to make hard choices.
Yeah.
They're 6-year terms. And in 6 years, a lot can happen. I was elected in November of 2019. I took office in January of 2020. The pandemic hit. We had to recover from that. We had to recover from a lot of lack of saving or preservation of our own assets.
Yeah.
We had to recover from poor bookkeeping in some cases. There's a lot of things that you don't hear about because they're tough choices. They happen internally. They're not really what makes the news. What makes the news is the controversy, or maybe the fluff pieces sometimes. The
feel-good stories.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But what we're doing in Smithfield is bringing our community back.
Yeah.
We're having parks events that are open to the public. We've streamed all of our meetings. Our transparency is incredible compared to what you see on most township websites.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's talked about a lot with transparency with other townships.
You can look at any land development plan that comes in. They're on our website. You can look at our plans for ordinances that we're considering amendments to.
Right.
We're really striving to be the best on this. And, we even kind of jokingly have these competitions among our friends in other municipalities. And it's all in good fun because it makes sure that we're all doing what we need to, improving our community.
Thank you. Well, thank you for answering that question. As for the safer, just something that you're running on, a safer Smithfield, you highlighted the township's collaboration with neighboring municipalities to secure sustainable emergency services funding, which we briefly went over. Can you walk us through what made that effort successful and how it has improved safety for residents and first responders?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, it's collaboration and bipartisanship. It's meeting people where they are. Not every elected official shares my party or my beliefs, but I think at the end of the day, we all want to make sure that our communities are safe. And so we can get a regional group of municipalities that all care about that one issue. It makes it immensely easy to tackle a solution or tackle the problem and come up with rational solutions. When you go at it from purely a partisan or ideological standpoint, you don't really get anywhere. So we were able to work with neighbors in Middle Smithfield Township, Price Township, Delaware Water Gap Borough. We've had conversations with our friends in Stroud and the other boroughs.
That's amazing.
Many of us share the same emergency services. Smithfield Township for EMS is covered by Bushkill Emergency Corps and Suburban EMS. And most of the municipalities on the eastern side of the county also have Suburban. As you go north, you get mostly Bushkill, but you also have Pocono Mountain Regional EMS and even Lehman Pike EMS in the northern tier of Middle Smithfield. So with fire companies, it's very similar too. We have 3 that cover Smithfield Township in Marshalls Creek Fire Company, Shawnee Fire Company, and Delaware Water Gap Fire Company. So it's important to work with the members, the individual firefighters or EMTs, their staff or administration, and our neighboring municipalities. We had several multi-night meetings on these issues, and what we really wanted to do was avoid catastrophe before solving this problem. It's a long-term issue that a lot of places have been grappling with. Most people will say that most major cities in the world have already solved it because they went paid. There's not enough money right now or resources to do that. So we have to keep volunteerism alive as long as we can while preparing for that inevitable paid solution in the long term.
Because we need the volunteers, so there's nothing we could do without it.
Absolutely. One of the things that's difficult is that you have first responders that work outside the municipality, which is only reasonable. You have to do what you have to do to earn a good living for your family, but it makes it difficult with daytime responses. So that's why you often get those multi-company calls. You're not necessarily getting 20 people per fire company during the day when there's a major fire. You're often getting 20 companies with 2 or 3 people each, things like that. So we wanted to make sure that on the fire side, we were ready for that transition, because EMS has mostly already made the transition to paid. There's still volunteerism, like with Bushkill Emergency Corps, and there's other ways to volunteer without being an EMT. But at the end of the day, the people that are saving lives are the ones that need the help the most. You know, Middle Smithfield said, "Who's going to rescue the rescuers?" And I'd like to think that in this collaborative effort, we've done what we need to for now in order to make sure that the system is sustainable for that solution, which is probably a multi-year plan.
And then especially now with the fire company, like with the droughts that's been happening, at least around here, the fires in neighboring municipalities, this is definitely crucial to make sure we still have that volunteer engagement.
Absolutely. And that's why it's important to make sure that your fire companies and EMS are involved in your land development process, to make sure that something doesn't get approved that's not going to be accessible for emergency services, you know, to make sure that there's enough sprinklers, that elevators are large enough for the stretchers, for EMTs to get through and bring in a patient. There's a number of reasons why you want to have them involved, and it's not just purely for, you know, grins and handshakes. It's to make sure that people are safe where they're going to be. We of course have to follow the construction code, the building codes, all these local regulations, but at the end of the day, the people that are going in to fight a fire or save someone that's having a heart attack, etc., that's important. You need to have them involved.
Yeah, of course. You're very young for at least politicians. Coming into this this role, how was it? Did you feel like you had to work harder to earn respect of like living politicians who have been in this as a career for so long?
I absolutely had to work harder to earn people's respect. There are a lot of supporters that I had going into it. That's how I was able to win the election against an incumbent supervisor. But you certainly have to get to know your partners around the county. We have the Pocono Mountains Council of Governments, which is a great organization. Every municipality sends one member, and we collaborate on things like de-icing or salt bids to make sure that roads are clear in the winter, line painting, fuel bids, etc. And when you work in those groups, the institutional knowledge that some of the more senior members have is invaluable. And honestly, I'm incredibly grateful for the people locally, because without their support and encouragement, I probably wouldn't have been able to continue. They were so good to me that they wanted me to learn, because they realized you need the next generation involved, because who's going to replace them eventually? You know, and even at 24 years old, I need to start thinking about who's going to take my place eventually. You know, I have no aspirations to stay in one position forever. It's important to get out before your expiration date. I think we see that at the national level for sure. And we don't want to see that happen at the local level. But there's a way to do it that is collaborative and make sure that everybody is fairly represented and no one leaves unhappy. You're not always going to agree, but you need people in these positions to succeed those that are sitting here now.
Yeah.
And the pandemic happened 3 months into my term.
That must have been so scary.
It was terrifying.
Yeah.
No one knew anything for several weeks. We didn't know much as elected officials at the local level compared to what federal officials might have known or might not have known. So we were kind of in this holding pattern where we had to make sure that things were still getting done, road maintenance, park maintenance. You know, there were shutdowns here and there, but nothing ever completely stopped. We made sure that at Smithfield we got a Ring camera so we could have appointments and make sure that people could come upstairs. It obviously set us back on zoning enforcement because the court system was shut down, you know, with the same types of issues. And they needed time to make sure that communications were secure, to make sure that it was still accessible to all. We had all those same issues compounded. You know, I wanted to stream meetings before the pandemic happened, but that was obviously an impetus for other people to start. So we had to put laptops on top of books and everything else to make sure that people could be seen.
Yeah.
You know, nobody knew what Zoom was when I took over as a supervisor from my predecessor. So we've used it ever since. It's been great. A lot of people come to our meetings that way. We live in a bedroom community in many ways, so it's good to have that engagement. And they can even rewatch it on Zoom or on YouTube. So that's important. The pandemic helped us make some changes that made government more accessible.
Those technology changes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now we have this great camera system called an OWL, which hangs from our ceiling, and it has a multi-directional camera, so it can capture the board as it deliberates and involve the public at the same time too when they step up. And it works because it picks up where someone is speaking. So it's great. People with mobility issues don't necessarily have to get up and go up to the podium. It's really simple for that type of involvement. But that probably more than anything earned respect for me among my peers.
During the pandemic.
They had to see that I could do what I said I was going to do. And that's sort of a hardship that a lot of young people face, especially in government. My two colleagues were nearly 80 and I was 19.
Oh, wow.
So in many ways, the it's not age, it's outlook thing is totally true. In other ways, it was harder because it's like, who's this 19-year-old kid that's going to sign my paycheck? I had detractors, people posting horrible things about me and my family online that still continues to this day, but you have to get through it. At the end of the day, we have a job to do.
And then during the pandemic, what was like one of the major things that you had a helping hand in for the community for Smithfield?
Well, one of the things was one of my colleagues suggested that we furlough or lay off all of our staff. And I thought that was incomprehensible. You know, you couldn't do that. That would mean that everything we would do for months, maybe a year, could all be over. We made sure, my other colleague and I, that we kept our staff on and we had them work through the pandemic. We had to do that in a number of challenging ways, but still making sure that we were there would help reduce fear. You know, we didn't need the fear-mongering that a lot of people did during the pandemic. We didn't want people thinking that they were automatically going to be sick when they went outside, but we also didn't want people to think that everything was normal either, right?
To get sick,
And we needed to make sure that permits were still being kept up to date because permits are not just some way for the government to make money. We're not allowed to profit off of permitting. It's to make sure that you're safe. And it's the reasonable cost that it takes that staff member to go out and do an inspection or review your plan, especially on the building code side. So we had to make sure that we were prepared to work remotely, and now we utilize that when necessary. Hopefully we don't have to deal with another pandemic-like situation, but keeping staff on was an important decision that I was able to help make. And that helped us get through some of the more challenging early days of the pandemic. We had information to share at times from the emergency management agencies, so we wanted to make sure we got that out. We were distributing things as necessary to the public. It was important to stay there.
What are some qualities as like a 19-year-old like starting out that you feel like you had the confidence to do this job? What were some of your qualities that really pushed you to start?
A lot of people assume, correctly so, that there were a lot of detractors and people that said you're too young.
Yeah, of course.
But a lot of people didn't think that.
Really?
Obviously enough for me to win.
Yeah, of course.
But I remember on election day, some gentleman said to me, come back when you're 25, you're way too young.
Yeah.
Obviously now I'm running for re-election at 24. I'll be 25 in September. I hope to earn his vote as well as everyone else's. But as much as you would get that, you got so much more positivity. People say it's time for the younger generation to step up.
Right.
I was very fortunate to go to East Stroudsburg School District. I graduated from South in 2018, so a lot of my classmates that did stay still lived in Smithfield Township, and their families knew me. They knew that I came from a good background, and it was great to see them.
Student, good kid.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and it was great to have their support. I hope to have
amazing.
it again. But it's a reminder that this is local.
Mm-hmm.
There are 8,000 people in Smithfield Township. I can't reasonably tell you I know every single one of them, but I certainly know most, if
paths,
not, almost all. Everybody knows each other here.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have municipal elections where the turnout is maybe 30, 35%, and you're talking only a few thousand voters, you certainly are going to know more of those people, whether you support me or not.
Yeah.
But I also work for you whether or not you support me. We have a job to do to keep our community safe, strong, and prosperous.
Yeah, thank you. So you previously campaigned for Representative Maureen Madden, and now you're campaigning not just for yourself, but also Patrick Best for Judge, Court of Common Pleas. What is it like juggling all those roles, and do you ever feel like it overlaps with your current position as supervisor?
I wouldn't say it overlaps in terms of inhibiting me from doing my job as supervisor or anything else I do at the township, but it is good to have an outside perspective.
Yeah.
Working for a countywide candidate in Patrick Best for judge, for example, it's a good way to get out into the other 19 municipalities. 170,000 people live in Monroe County.
Right.
Smithfield makes up a small but mighty important portion of that. But it's nice to see how other municipalities do things. That's why we're all members of the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors. We call it PSATs, not the PSATs, as people like to compare it to.
Okay.
And that's one of those member organizations where we get to compare and contrast what we do. It's a great tool to see what's possible in other townships. And I think getting that perspective on the local level is important too. So that's why I enjoy working on a countywide basis. But I'm particularly motivated because Patrick's a tremendous candidate. He's got the boldest background to do that job. It's important to know that 2 fantastic judges are retiring. So we need to replace them with folks that really know what they're doing, that don't need on-the-job training. I think that's important. But working for other candidates is great because it keeps you active in the community. It helps you see from another person's perspective. And no position is on an island. A judge of the Court of Common Pleas is going to review plenty of things from Smithfield Township.
Yeah.
Not all litigation is bad litigation. It's not always a contentious lawsuit, but it's a question of, was this development approved in accordance with X policy? It's, does this person have the right to do this? It's as simple as zoning enforcement too, because that starts at the magisterial district court, and then upon appeal, it'll restart at the Court of Common Pleas. So it's important to elect the right people to those positions. And working for Rep. Madden was one of the most rewarding experiences for me. I was her chief of staff for 2 years. We had 2 offices at the time. They're continuing that. I think they've even added a 3rd satellite office. It's important to know how the state works. Not just from the basics of government, but the relationship between a municipality and its state legislator is important. We're fortunate to have a good relationship with Representative Probst and Senator Brown, and it's a bipartisan relationship, which is great. It helps us make sure that we have the resources we need to either get road improvements done, to work with our first responders to get them grants, as we've done in the past. I really enjoyed that position. I love to see her staff thrive. It's important to know that real people do these jobs. It's not just some robot that you leave a voicemail with.
The personality behind the face, the voice, the name.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And most of their staffers are all really fantastic local people that are going to fight hard for you regardless of your party or your background. Oftentimes the people that I remember helping in Rep. Madden's office, they didn't vote at all.
Oh, wow.
So apathy is still a problem. But regardless of that, we wanted to make sure that people were taken care of. It was, I can't afford my electric bill. My kids are going to be cold. Or do you know a food pantry in the area? I'm in desperate need. It was things like that. And it's important to see how a municipality can be helpful in situations like that too. There are different programs for water and heating assistance that municipalities can cooperate with the state on, but also getting the local share account, which is the gambling funds from like Mount Airy and the online gambling. That money comes back to us when we get a competitive grant that can help us improve the community too. We've utilized that for the first responders, but we've also utilized it for Marshalls Falls Park, Waterfront Park, other park improvements. It can be used to get a leaf collection truck, and there's all sorts of things that we've done, and that's important too. You don't quite see on the news how exciting it is to have an automatic arm that'll collect leaves off the side of the road, but it's important.
It helps.
You need clear, visible, safe roadways, and that's one of the ways that we do it. We have 54 miles of road in Smithfield Township, so we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can there.
Thank you. So if a voter sees your name on the ballot or they watch a Z-Files podcast and isn't sure yet, what's the one thing that you would tell them to help them understand you and why they should vote for you?
People often start with the simple question, are you better off now than you were 6 years ago? And I think that's what you have to ask yourself about the township. Whether or not you align with my vision, we can disagree. It's okay to not have the same thoughts on everything, but I think there's no doubt that we've improved the living condition in Smithfield Township. We've made it safer, stronger in Smithfield. That's, of course, my slogan. But safer, we've been supporting our first responders at a historic level. Stronger, we have an office that is responsive to the needs of our community. They're always there for us. They're going to make sure that they're going to deliver for you in an efficient way. They're going to care about what you present to them, and we're going to make sure that we deliver for you. And in terms of Smithfield in general, we're preserving the character of the township while making progress at the same time. We're elected to make tough choices. I've made a lot of tough choices. Land development, taxes, personnel. It's all in the name of a better Smithfield Township. And I think it's important to consider what type of hole we had to recover from. But that's not necessarily how I think about it. I like to think that we live in a strong community and it's improving every day. And I want to leave Smithfield in a place that the next team, whether or not they agree with my policies, can take the ball and run with it. So I would ask for another 6 years to finish the job I started.
That's great. Is there anything else that you would like to add for the audience?
Well, I would say no matter what tough decisions you're faced with, don't give up. It's certainly going to be different than you think it is to combat whatever you're facing. I certainly didn't expect the pandemic or any of the other challenges when I was elected to a 6-year term, but we've come through stronger. And it's important to never lose sight of the broader goal. I appreciate your support. You can learn more about me at jacobpride.com, or you can find my page on Facebook. I'm happy to meet with you at any time. Let's chat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.